Have you ever handed someone everything you had and told yourself it was enough just to know you did it? My name is Victor Tanner. I am 62 years old, and for 7 years I told myself exactly that. The house on Habersham Street smelled like pine floor wax and something older underneath. The particular smell of a house that has been lived in for 50 years without apology. The pen the day I signed a bank transfer had a soft resistance to it, the kind you notice when you are writing something that cannot be undone. After that, there was a long period of phone calls that went to voicemail, and a silence I had learned to stop naming. My brother Clive told me the agreement never existed. He was wrong about that. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge, where quiet choices make the loudest statements. If you've ever been overlooked by people who should have seen you first, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Victor Tanner, and I work for Savannah Electric Co-op for 34 years. I started as a journeyman at 22, earned my master electrician certification at 31, and ran a crew of 9 for the final 14 years before I took early retirement at 56. I live on Habersham Street in Savannah's Victorian district, the same street my parents lived on for 51 years, 3 blocks north, in the house where my brother Clive and I grew up. The neighborhood had changed considerably since then. The house had not. My parents were Douglas and Miriam Tanner. My father had been a pressman at a printing plant in downtown Savannah for 30 years and retired in 1999 with a pension that, by 2015, was not covering what it needed to cover. My mother had worked part-time bookkeeping until her eyesight made it impractical. They were both careful people who had built their life in a particular way and found, in their 80s, that the world had gotten more expensive faster than they had anticipated. I had been driving to their house every Sunday for 11 years by then, ever since my divorce from Carol in 2004, which left me without a household of my own to anchor the week. I mowed their lawn and checked their gutters and sat with my father on the back porch drinking coffee. He made too strong and talking about nothing in particular. My stomach dropped slightly the morning. He called me at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday and said there was a situation with the house. The situation was a second mortgage that had reached its maturity date without being fully retired. The shortfall was $214,000. My father said they had looked at every option. He said the bank was not interested in extending. He said if they could not cover it by April 3rd, they would lose the house. I said I needed 24 hours. I drove to First National Bank on Bull Street the following morning and arranged a transfer from the savings account I had built over 34 years of co-op wages, overtime on holiday weekends, and 9 years of deferred vacations. The account had $231,000 in it at that point. I signed the transfer at 11:14 a.m. on April 3rd, 2015. Before I left the bank that morning, I stopped at the desk of the branch manager, a woman named Phyllis Odom who had handled my accounts for 6 years. I asked her for 2 copies of the transfer confirmation and a sheet of bank letterhead. I sat at a small table near the window and wrote out by hand the terms of the loan. The principal was $214,000. The repayment schedule was open, no fixed date, no interest in the first 5 years, simple interest thereafter at the federal short-term rate. I signed it. I asked the 2 bank tellers nearest the desk to witness it. I dated it April 3rd, 2015. Phyllis Odom initialed the bank letterhead at the bottom as a notarial witness to the signatures. I folded 1 copy and put it in my jacket pocket. The other I placed in my safe deposit box at the same branch before I left. My chest went still when I walked out of the bank. The air on Bull Street was already warm at 11:47 a.m. in April the way it gets in Savannah, the kind of warmth that feels like a hand on the back of your neck. I paid the property insurance on my parents' house for 6 consecutive years, $2,847 annually, because their fixed income had stopped covering it, and Clive said he was managing their finances, but the renewal notices kept coming to me. I replaced the electrical panel in 2009, 2 weekends, $3,200 in materials, and wrote the work off as a family matter. I had put Clive through his last 2 years of community college in 1989 and 1990, $8,400 total, because our parents could not cover it that year, and I was already working full-time and had the money. I mentioned it once. He thanked me once. We did not discuss it again. The Habersham Street house had a set of property tax records going back to 1971 that my father kept in a manila accordion folder in the hall closet. I had seen it every Sunday for 11 years. I knew what the house was worth and what it had cost to keep. 3 months after the transfer, my parents sent me a card. My mother's handwriting, careful and slanted. It said, "Thank you." It said they were grateful. It said they did not know what they would have done. There was no mention of repayment. My throat tightened when I read it. I put it in the drawer with the Sunday crosswords and did not think about it for a long time. In 2014, I had wired the second-floor addition my father had always wanted. For weeks of evenings and weekends, materials and labor both mine. I drove my father to every cardiology appointment at Memorial University Medical Center for 3 years running. Tuesdays at 8:30 a.m., after my mother's vision made driving unsafe. When my parents fell behind on property taxes in 2016, I drove to the Chatham County Tax Office and arranged an 18-month deferment with the assessor personally. When their homeowner's insurance denied a water damage claim in 2018, I spent 14 hours across 3 weeks on phone calls and correspondence and got the denial reversed, saving them $11,200. Clive was managing their affairs. He was busy with that. The first direct conversation about the $214,000 happened in the spring of 2019. My father's health had been declining, and I had driven over on a Sunday and, while my mother was in the kitchen, asked my father quietly whether he had thought about how the repayment would work. He was quiet for a long time. His face did not change. He said he thought I had done it as a gift. My face went still. I said I had not. I said I had written it down, and I had a copy, and I thought we had an understanding. He said he remembered it differently. I nodded. My breath went shallow for exactly 1 count. Then I said I understood and asked if he wanted more coffee. The second conversation was with Clive. He called me on a Monday morning at 8:47 a.m. in October of 2019. I did not know until later that my father had told him about my Sunday question. Clive said, in the even tone he used when he'd already decided something, "Victor, Mom and Dad don't have the kind of money you're asking about. You know how they live. If there was something in writing, they would have told me. I'm the one who handles their affairs." I didn't answer. My face went still. Clive said he thought the most respectful thing would be to let it go. He said our parents were in their 80s. He said putting pressure on them over money, his word, pressure, was not the kind of thing the family needed. I said I would think about it. I said nothing else. My shoulders went tight driving home on Habersham Street that afternoon, and I held the wheel in both hands and let the feeling pass. There was a family meeting at my parents' house in November of 2019, the second Sunday of the month, at 3:52 in the afternoon. Clive had organized it. He brought his wife, Karen. My mother sat in her chair by the window, and my father sat across from me at the kitchen table. Clive went through his version of the family finances, the pension, the house value, the expected estate. He did not mention the $214,000. When I raised it, my mother said, in the quiet way she had of closing the subject, "Victor, we just don't remember it that way." I said nothing. My chest tightened. I kept my hands flat on the table. Clive said the subject was settled as far as he was concerned. My father was quiet on the drive home. I had offered to take him to his Wednesday cardiology appointment. We sat in the truck at a red light on Abercorn Street, and he did not look at me. His hands were in his lap. Something in my hand steadied around the wheel. I had spent 34 years logging every job cost as a crew chief, materials, labor, overhead, variance from estimate, because the discipline of a written record was the difference between a solvent operation and a failing one. I applied that discipline to my own life the same way. In a fireproof box in my study on Habersham Street, I kept a personal ledger going back to 2006. Every financial act involving my parents recorded by date, amount, and purpose. The $214,000 entry was on page 31. The safe deposit box number was written in the margin. I drove to First National Bank on Bull Street on a Thursday morning in January of 2022. I asked to access my safe deposit box. I opened it at 9:08 a.m. The loan agreement was there, the handwritten copy, the transfer confirmation clipped to it, Phyllis Odom's initials at the bottom, the two teller signatures still legible. My chest held level when I looked at it. I put it back in the box and drove home. My father died on the second Sunday of October, 2022. Quietly at home, in the chair by the window. I was there. Clive arrived 20 minutes later. We did not speak about the $214,000 that day. The estate inventory was filed on January 14th. I reviewed the public filing at the Chatham County Courthouse. The Habersham Street house was valued at $387,000. The liquid assets were listed. The $214,000 was not listed as a liability. My stomach turned when I read the inventory. I sat in my truck outside the courthouse on Montgomery Street for 9 minutes. Then I called Eugene Hartley. Eugene Hartley had a property and estate practice on Broughton Street. Thorough, direct, the kind of attorney who read the document before he asked a question. I drove to his office and put the loan agreement and the ledger on his desk at 2:17 p.m. He read the agreement. He read the transfer confirmation. He read Phyllis Odom's initials and the teller signatures. He said, "Victor, is this the original?" I said it was one of two. The other was in the bank box. He said, "Then you have a creditor claim against this estate." My hands went still on the armrests. Eugene Hartley filed a formal creditor claim against the estate of Douglas Tanner for $214,000 principal plus accrued simple interest at a federal short-term rate from April 3rd, 2020. The end of the 5-year interest-free period specified in the agreement at 4:41 p.m. on March 7th. Before the filing, Phyllis Odom, still branch manager at First National Bank's Bull Street branch, retrieved the safe deposit box contents and certified the document's authenticity and the date of deposit at 10:33 a.m. that same morning. She signed a notarized statement confirming that the document had been deposited on April 3rd, 2015, the same date as the transfer, and had remained in the box undisturbed. Clive's attorney, a man named Reeves who had a practice on Price Street, contacted Eugene Hartley 3 days after the filing. He said his client disputed the enforceability of the agreement. He said a handwritten document on bank letterhead with teller witnesses was not a formal loan instrument. Eugene Hartley retained Sandra Bryce, a certified handwriting examiner with a Chatham County Court appointment, to confirm the witness signatures. She completed her analysis at 2:09 p.m. on March 21st and certified that both signatures were genuine and consistent with the teller's known handwriting samples, which Phyllis Odom provided from bank employment records. Reeves filed no further challenge after receiving Sandra Bryce's report. The resolution meeting was at 11:02 a.m. on the first Thursday of May at Eugene Hartley's office on Broughton Street. Clive arrived with Karen, but without his attorney. He sat across the table from me and looked at the document one more time before he nodded. The estate paid the creditor claim in full. The principal plus interest over the 2 years since the free period ended came to $228,740. It was paid from the liquid assets before the remaining estate was distributed. Clive's share of the inheritance was reduced accordingly. I drove home on Habersham Street at 12:41 p.m. The magnolias on the block were in early bloom, which happens in Savannah in May if the spring has been warm. I parked in front of the house and sat for a moment with the window down. I did not call anyone. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table until the afternoon light shifted. Victor Tanner, 62 years old, and the safe deposit box on Bull Street is still open in his name. Some debts don't disappear because no one wrote them down. They just wait. Some things are owed because of what they cost, some because of who paid, and some because someone 34 years ago made a habit of writing things down. When Clive looked at that document on the table and finally nodded, what do you think he was thinking in that moment? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.